Hello, say something now.
What's up? Can you hear me?
Hey, I hear you now. Yeah, I hear you.
Nice.
Hey, man.
What's
How
going
you
on? How
feeling?
are you?
Great, man. Great, great. Just
Good.
turn on the lights. It's good to meet you, man.
I
I think
know.
I've seen you around town, but I don't think we ever really officially met.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, likewise. Likewise. We're almost meeting.
No, man, it's good, man. It's good that thanks for booking the call, man. I think this is, great to just have people that are kind of dialing in on what we're doing. And
Yeah,
and so it's a lot of kind of creating a community of people and sharing knowledge. And we also want to make it really accessible to people like yourself, who a
right.
lot of who love these younger artists, we look up to and want to study with. And so we try to find a centralized place
Right.
so that we kind of like just kind of funnel them off to you. And
Right.
so that's also a part of it. And then we invite instructors to come and do activities, workshops, online workshops, stuff like that. And so so we can kind of like, as we go along, work that out. And this is kind of just like an introductory thing. And then we do just like a quick interview, and then we put content out and let people know that you're in the shed.
Got you. Cool. That's great, man. I really like, you take an initiative to like set up that resource and the infrastructure and just set it up so people can, like you said, share information and kind of everybody can move forward. That's very cool.
Hey, bro, I appreciate that a lot, man. And it's great to, talk about it and to add people into this conversation, man. It's interesting because, in this conversation, I think there's a lot of things I'd like to ask you, right? But, even thinking about it, man, you're super accomplished, and, you're an amazing composer, and you do a lot of great work, and great alto saxophonist. From your perspective, where do you think we are right now musically? What are some things we can be doing
Mm,
in terms of our approach, in terms of what can actually take us, closer to, getting that sort of connection with, the listeners in a way.
mm, mm. Yeah, I mean, man, that's a great question to think about. That's a lot. Where we are, what we can, as a community keep doing, um, and then how to connect with a community beyond the community of musicians.
Yeah.
Uh, you know, I mean, for the most part, you know, I'm really excited about, the community of musicians, people connected to jazz and its exponents, because there's so many really brilliant, hardworking musicians like yourself and other people that I'm just excited to come here, like hear what's going on, like that's new information for me. It's motivating me to keep trying to move forward. Last night, actually, I did a little last minute gig in LA with a pianist named Paul Cornish, uh,
Yeah, that's cool.
who's incredible, player, composer, young bass player named Jermaine Paul, and Jonathan Pinson was the drummer. And it's exciting, man. It's exciting to, just to speak of guys that are younger than I am. And I think people seem to feel like more and more secure to kind of pursue the music in the way that's most meaningful for them, whatever that may mean stylistically, in terms of, kind of specialization, stuff like that. So that's cool. I think it's, the thing that I see as more of a challenge is, not getting kind of overwhelmed by how big it all is and how many people are out there trying to do it. And, when I was in college, basically, I was just trying to get better. And my mandate was I was just trying to spend time with Jackie McLean, basically, and
Mm.
like trying to scheme a way to do that, because I didn't go to Hart School of Music where he was teaching, but I went to school nearby. And thankfully I was able to do that and kind of get into his orbit. But I sort of, you know, I didn't expect anybody to do that for me, you know. And I sort of realized at a certain point, like I'm nobody's going to hand this to me. I have to like figure out how to do this via, you know, be deserving of it, try to put time in on the instrument and try to think about like, you know, how can I sort of make this happen? And I think that can be a challenge now for people to kind of have that mindset of not like an entitlement thing, but to kind of sort of accept that each one of us has to kind of like in some ways sort of start from scratch and blaze our own trail in terms of like how we move through the music, how we deal with our own personal historical moment. So that's, you know, I think that's always a challenge for each generation. And then the other thing I see, you know, I teach at a great school in LA, just outside of LA called Cal Arts. And I'm grateful for it. I get a lot out of it. At the same time, I see that as certain aspects of the music become more and more connected to institutions, you know, and as the sort of cost of enrolling in those institutions goes up, it kind of it has an effect on who's able to participate in the music in some ways and who's able to be connected to it. And an effect that I think is maybe is not entirely positive. You know, I feel like it's maybe fostering a certain point of view more so than others. I don't really have like an answer for like how to solve that, but I'm aware of it. And it's funny because Jackie McLean was one of the very first people. He and Max Roach and a few others, Archie Shepp, Horace Tapscott out here in LA, to like sort of begin the process of connecting this music with academia and sort of like undergraduate and graduate teaching in the late 60s. And now here we are, I guess almost 60 years later, and it's kind of, you know, manifesting in a different way. But anyways, I don't know if that was that coherent, but that's what comes to mind, you know, with those kind of big questions.
Man, that's a really great observation, man, about you know, where we're at. And I think it's important how you mentioned people don't need to be afraid of their own path. You know, it's like the more we are, you know, comfortable and confident in knowing that what we're doing is exactly what needs to be done in terms of what truly moves us in the decisions we actually want to make, then that actually puts us in a better position.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. And it's easier said than done. And, you know, it's a challenge. You know, I think most people really want to connect. That's my favorite part of the music, is the human connection and the social connection and the friendships and the, you know, connection with listeners and other musicians and mentors. And I think everybody kind of has that impetus, which is fundamental. But at the same time, we kind of have to like keep the blinders on and just kind of like follow our path. And I think, you know, that's a big part of the challenge, at least for me, with you know, social media, is to kind of take advantage of what's super positive about it, but also, you know, do it in a way where I can ultimately kind of stay focused on, you know, my individual, you know, kind of challenges and preoccupations and stuff like that. I'm not very good at that, but I'm working on it, you know.
It's always a work in progress, man. Yeah, that's the energy, brother. You know, it's funny because one of the questions I know a lot of people probably would be curious to ask you is in terms of in composition and when you're writing. First of all, what's your thought process about rhythm, and when it comes to odd meters, and how do you incorporate that? You know, what's your thought process on that? Is it something that's all connective to you, or is it something that, you know, you consider separately, like something that you intentionally, you know, kind of put into the music? Yeah, I'll start with that for now.
Yeah, when it comes to composing, you know, I think I think, I try to check out all kinds of music. I think like all of us, I think the literature or the recordings that when it comes down to it, the most intimately familiar with is like kind of Blue Note recordings from, I don't know, like I guess starting with Bud Powell, those recordings from I think the early 50s to the late 60s and particularly early 60s. Andrew Hill, Jackie McLean, we know all the people, Lee Morgan, and so that's sort of my North Star in a way, and we could take Jackie's records as a starting point, and Andrew too. So many of those compositions to my ear are really about creating an environment for the soloists and for the band to interact. And that's kind of priority one, is you might write a beautiful melody, you might have a hip set of chord changes or a rhythmic thing or whatever, or things in odd meters, if it's Herbie Nichols or Max Roach or whoever it is, or Andrew or whatever. But it's sort of all creating this framework for people to express themselves and to sort of pull off this trick of setting people up to succeed and do what they do best and express themselves, but also find a way to kind of challenge them, ideally to sort of discover new aspects and elements of their own creativity, and I know for me, that's always like the pinnacle of like dealing with the composition as an improviser, is like, if I feel like, oh, okay, I have something to say on this, but actually there's some challenges that are actually going to help me grow and actually help me discover some stuff about what I do or who I am. So that's kind of usually the kind of point of view I'm striving for when I write something. And I actually just in about a month, I have this album coming out with a big band, with a French jazz orchestra, which was about 17 musicians and some electronics and stuff like this. And it was the same kind of thought process, the challenge was, I think probably for me, the most critical compositional step is like who you choose to, like which human beings you choose to work with, or who you invite to work with you and hope they accept. I think that's maybe not as talked about or taken as a given, but that element of who you choose to collaborate with, I think is the most, that's a compositional step that's really critical and maybe the most critical. So that's always my kind of point of view. So all the work I do with all the elements of music, with harmony, with rhythm, with timbre, just dynamics, melody, I'm always thinking like, well, what's this gonna mean when we actually hit? Because I'm not as interested in like a super worked out, melody and hits and this thing and there's counterpoint. And then when it's time to like improvise, it's like, oh, okay, let's just be on D minor, or let's forget about the hits. Sometimes that works actually really great because there's such a vibe in the written material that it kind of carries over. Mm-hmm. But for me, and maybe because I'm a Virgo, I don't know what it is, I'm a little more interested in more concrete elements structurally that kind of set up an environment that we have to, kind of all of us are forced to engage with. And, I took that away from Jackie. I spent the better part of 10 years studying and performing with Anthony Braxton. And that's a big part of a lot of his composing, is kind of thinking about like, what's the environment going to be like for improvising? So I think I definitely, sort of inherited that or copped that from those guys because I liked the results. And I think truthfully too, like I really relate to like learning a bird tune or a monk tune or bud tune or what, you know, standards, period. Um, uh, the fact that there's work that we can do together, like in an ensemble, but then there's also stuff I can go home and get to by myself, not just on the instrument and not just in terms of my hearing. That's always has to grow, but in terms of like this piece that Giverton wrote, or this piece that Paul Cornish wrote, or that Vijay Iyer wrote, or Tyshawn, or whoever it is, like I can shed that and get better at improvising on that structure or that whatever that piece proposes. And that's really important. I like that. I enjoy that there's stuff I can do specific to that piece. So, that's something I associate with the first repertoire, you know, bebop repertoire that I tried to engage with. So that's in my own pieces. I'm always thinking about that too. I don't want it to just be some piece that's like, I don't have to shed this. I can just go, you know, just whatever, practice. And I'm like, I want you to have something where, oh, I've got to like deal with this, what's being proposed by this composition. Not because it's better than or worse than other approaches. That's just something that I relate to, you know, personally. So that's what I write, you know. And the rhythm thing is like, that's sort of part of that, you know. And I can't even really remember at this point how I got involved in all that, but I think it was just, you know, hearing Henry Threadgill's music, hearing Greg Osby, Braxton, Max Roach, you know, all different people, Mark Shim, and kind of trying to my best to understand how that music was structured and trying different ideas of my own to kind of set that up. Andrew Hill, of course, Woody Shaw, um, and that's it, man. And then I just sort of started to reach out to people that I really admired, and did a lot of, you know, did a lot of shedding with musicians, did a lot of shedding with like MIDI, you know, just to like keep myself honest. And yeah, that could describe an average day in my life too, except that now I have 2 young children, so that's also got to be in the equation somewhere.
Balance out the shed.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. Oh man, that's beautiful, man. I love when you put it that way. And I do think that when you said that, it made me think of like every composition being its own world. And like, you know, when someone gives you their music, it's like they're giving you their world, and you have to, you know, basically you have to be in their world. You got to see what it's like. You gotta, you know, you gotta experience it. You know, it's not
Yeah.
just something that you just, you know, come in and then, you know, expect to just know it all. I mean, you have to explore it, you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
some people have a gift for, you know, writing a melody or writing something that's very lyrical, that is very evocative and kind of pushes you in, you know, can kind of create a world that way.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had that gift, unfortunately. So I try to get to it other ways. But yeah, like Woody Shaw, you know, each one of his pieces to me is such a unique kind of set of challenges and ideas, harmonically, you know.
Yeah.
And I love that. You know, you can't, and it's so hard to do. It's so hard to find that balance of doing something that's like really, you put your stamp on it as a composer, but also do it in such a way where other cats are excited to engage with it and feel like they can transform it. I think that might be one of the hardest things from in terms of composition, across milieus for anybody to do. You know, it's very challenging.
Well, man, that's the goal, man. I think I look at it like a trampoline, you know. You know, you're
Yeah.
giving these
Yes.
people, you know, like you're giving them a palette for them to, you know, soar on. And it's like that, I feel like that's the greatest potential, because you can have something that's great on its own. But
Yeah.
then if it's already great on its own, if you make it where it's also something where other musicians can soar, it only takes it to greater heights, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yes,
it's
sir.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, that's beautiful to hear you talk about that, man. It it makes me think even more like now that you talk about the shed, man. What's your shedding like?
Oh man. What have I been shedding? I'm still trying to just like, I'm sad to say, I'm I'm still trying to like get like 100% comfort level across all the keys, like I can of course function in all the keys, but there's still like certain keys where I'm a little bit more, it's a little bit more, I'm just at ease, or I'm just hearing things better. And ones where, because of how it lays on the instrument or whatever, I just have to put that extra time in. So I'm always trying to like figure that out and get my ear together. I think probably like a lot of people, in some ways, I mean, I have a routine on the instrument to try and keep myself together. In some ways I sort of rely on playing, new music that people ask me to play or record, or that I'm writing to sort of keep my sword sharp, so to speak. So I like that. I'm grateful for that. That I can have had that as part of my practice routine, is when people throw new music at me, or throw kind of challenging information at me, that helps me, kind of stay up to date, so I don't get they don't start calling me old man Lehman,
Uh,
because I can't keep up. It'll happen one day, but
hey
um,
man, I think you'd be keeping up as long as you live, man.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try. Do you find that as well, that ends up being part of like what keeps you kind of on your toes, is like your own music and get music from other people and stuff like this?
Absolutely, man. I think that's part of the experience too, being in those, like, we shed to, to be able to, have music like that to actually, dissect and to, into what do you call it? Internalize, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? So I think
yeah,
that it's cool that, we do have that privilege where it's not just something where you're playing these albums just to keep maintenance, or you're
yeah,
playing, some, exercise for saxophone, just keep maintenance, but there are actual, musical things that people are actually working on that are like expansive. And that's always that always makes the journey more fulfilling,
yeah. That's always been really important to me, to feel like I could have, try to develop something distinctive on my instrument, but do it in a way that could be compatible and sought out by my peers, and asked to contribute to other people's projects. And there've been periods where that wasn't really going on as much, and I was like, oh shit, am I fucking up? Like, am I doing something wrong? Like someone was like, man, Steve, it's really interesting, but you stay over there, and we'll be over here. um, but it was just, thankfully, just kind of different phases, different waves and stuff. And I love that so much, being able to contribute to other people's projects, and kind of help them, get their vision off the ground and all that. That's a big part of the puzzle, I think.
Yeah, and that's also a social aspect too,
Yeah.
not just stuck in a room, you know.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to have that. You got to have that for sure. Yeah. But yeah, that's sort of my shed routine, just kind of combination of stuff I'm trying to get to. Sometimes I'll make little lists, um, try to work on my ear, try to, we just did, in June, a recording with, a trio I've had together for a long time, with Damian Reed and Matt Brewer, and
Yeah.
invited Mark Turner as like a kind of a special guest, because he's out here in LA as well, which is a very welcome addition to the scene out here. And all three of those guys, their hearing is so much, and their creativity is so much. And then Mark is a saxophonist, his ears are so massive that it's inspiring to work with him, but it's also like sort of putting a little spotlight on some things that I need to I need to address
oh
in my own playing. But that's
man, when
that.
is that out?
I'm not sure. It was a really interesting book of music we did. It was a couple new pieces of mine, and we did a monk tune. We did Trinkle Tinkle, and then we did about half or a little more than half the repertoire was speaking of Anthony Braxton, was Anthony Braxton pieces, mostly that he recorded in the 70s. So I think we're going to try and release it. He's going to turn 80 actually in a couple 2025. I think will be his 80th birthday year. So we might sort of try to time the release of that to sort of coincide with, kind of celebration of his
Oh man,
legacy and all that. Yeah.
that's exciting.
Yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
cool. It'll be cool. Yes, sir. Yeah.
It's funny because air training. What are some of the things you do for air training? I'm sure a lot of people want to hear that too.
Oh man, I wish I had more stuff. I've gone through all time. I've gone through stuff where I just like will try to be in one key all day. I've had stuff where I have like an app on the computer that's just like spitting notes at me, and I try to like find them on the instrument. You know what I mean? Because I don't have pitch, unfortunately.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm, sometimes I'll just try to like, or sing an idea and see if I'm like can get in the zone of where that is on my instrument. And my hearing is much better, actually, maybe not surprisingly, in my vocal range. So stuff that's like below it, like very low bass notes or super high above. I don't have as much facility kind of like hearing what the note is or like how it relates. It's fascinating. I need to work on it more. I think probably like a lot of us, my strongest is like if I like hear some kind of harmony or just one note and play a note on my instrument, I like immediately, you're like, oh,
You
now
navigate.
I know
Yeah.
where to go,
Yeah.
because
No, absolutely.
that's you.
What's that app that you use that spits out notes?
I think it's called I'm not sure if I was using a website that's free called musictheory.net. And I think there might be something where it'll just go, you can set it on a chromatic setting and set the range, and it'll just like kind of spit notes at you. There's a more like computer music oriented program called Max MSP, where you could I think I've set that up to just kind of random pitch generator, and it'll spit it out to you like as piano notes or whatever, something like this. So yeah, I need to work on that more. Yeah, that's kind of like what comes to mind. What about you? You got anything that's working for you lately?
Have you used Harmony Cloud much by Stefan
No.
Harris?
Who did it?
It's cool.
Stefan Harris?
Yeah, he made it. He made that app. Yeah, it's cool, man. It's great. I've used that. I know Emmanuel and Joel definitely use that. Or they have used it at some point in time. It's cool because he has like, chord progression, random generator, like bass note, random generator.
Right.
And like he has like different challenges where you can like try to beat your high score or something like that. Yeah, it's like
I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna check that out for sure. I have not. Joel and Emmanuel have not hit me to that when I've been keeping that for themselves. That's very cool. I was just talking to about Stefan yesterday with Jonathan Pinson. We were talking about different saxophonists working with effects and stuff like that. Because there's a couple guys, ton in LA, Josh Johnson and David Otis, who are doing really cool stuff like that. And then I was talking about Casey Benjamin as, some stuff where it's just so integrated the way he works with effects and his own playing. And Pinson, he was like, yeah, that was the sound of Blackout. And I was like, for a second, I thought he was talking about like black radio and the experiment, and I was like, oh no, he's actually talking about black. He's like old enough to remember Stephon Harris and those albums.
Got
That
you.
band he had, Blackout, I think with Casey and um, I might be different. I think Mark Carey was the pianist for a long time, and maybe Terry Gully was drummer. And anyways, they did a couple handful of albums on Blue Note, maybe in like the 90s, early 2000s.
Oh man, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, it's definitely worth it. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
man, this is great conversation, man. This is amazing stuff, brother. Thank you for for sharing that information with us, bro. That was
Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll get to hear about some of what you're working on or who you're listening to these days also.
hey
Some
man,
special sauces.
man, I was just telling someone these past couple of days, obviously when you're writing, you're trying to dial into that.
Yeah.
But usually, like I'm always listening to like uh Miles Second Quintet stuff. Like Peter Kilimanjaro is like one of my favorite albums.
Mm-hmm.
Wallace Rooney Jr. actually hit me to that album.
Mm.
So yeah, it's like that kind of stuff. And then someone was asking me about like Bach, and I was like, man, like there's this Bach BWV 637 or something like that. It's like Dirk Adams Fall. I don't know if you've heard that one. But like
No.
that one is something that I always go back to in terms of like composition. I mean, it is cool because whoever asked was kind of connecting that to like church music and like and
Right.
how like a lot of that harmony and that kind of harmony influenced like a lot of the hymns and how that then seeps its way to contemporary gospel music. And so I mean, yeah, so like that stuff is a big part of my stuff, gospel music and like Haitian music, like compa
Yeah.
music. Yeah, man, it's just been an array of like different stuff, man. I honestly, I'm super curious about what other people are listening to as well, because like, or I would say like if someone is playing something on the speakers or something, like, I'm
Yeah.
always dialing into, oh, what's going on? Like, what is that? Because I find that some of those like just eventful kind of like happenings, you might bump into something that, can spark an inspiration.
Yeah.
So I'm always listening out for what other people are listening to, like just on the regular.
Right. Yeah, that's the best, to keep your ears open. And I want to hear more about the Haitian music. You said, tell me it's like you said a certain style.
So it's compa, yes, like KOMPA, and like
Okay.
there's this. So like a lot of people like Godwin Lee and Obed Calvert, like you hear a lot of their music and they have that influence in it. And but like there's people when I was growing up that I heard. There's this band called NU LLOK, New Look.
Nunuk. Okay.
Yeah, so like New Look, but NU.
Oh, I see. New Look. Okay, got you.
Yeah, and so it was that band for me was one of the bands that inspired me compositionally too, just melodically, how
Yeah.
they treat the melody. So there's a lot. So like there's a lot that like even nowadays like I'm connecting, and it's cool to kind of, just as you say, like figure out like who you are in all these different settings. And so I've just been in that deep process right now.
Have you ever come across this woman, Val Gianti, Val Inc? Have you guys ever crossed paths? She's a turntablist and a kind of electronic musician, and she's like, yes, she was in a band with Wallace Roney at one point. She's like I think pretty implicated in Terry Lynn Carrington's program up at Berkeley, and teaches up there. And she's originally she's Haitian, and does a lot of stuff with just integrating like very hip approaches to electronics with like recordings of folkloric music from Haiti and stuff like that. and I've known her for a long time. We've collaborated a couple times here and there and stuff. She's totally amazing.
Wow.
I'm trying to think. I believe like she's a little hard to keep up with. Chris Davis, pianist, did a project recently that Val was a part of. It's just somebody to
Wow. I'm gonna check that out,
keep,
man.
keep an eye out for. Yeah.
Yeah.
She's been doing it for a minute, so she's got it. It's polished. She's
Yeah. Man,
yeah,
that's beautiful. That's
yeah,
beautiful.
for sure.
Man, so I'm what I'm gonna do is as we get off, I'm gonna like keep you in touch with some of the activities that we're thinking of doing and like cool
Cool.
stuff. Like I can definitely see like a air training thing or what I mean? Like we can
Great.
do like a lot of cool stuff, so I'll definitely keep you in touch with that stuff and how we can move forward and just man, thank you for your time, bro. It's
Yeah,
just great. These
likewise.
conversations are like all really like I was having these conversations with cats in New York and I was like, man, people also have to get in on these because it can probably help someone that's in a similar situation, like especially in New York.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really it's incredible. I was listening to a little of the conversation you did with Justin Robinson and kind of hearing his reflections on playing with Roy and just stuff you posted recently that is really precious, to me, or
Thank you, bro.
hearing Keon talk about, kind of how it worked with Charles Tolliver and, all that stuff is like, where else are you going to come across that unless on whatever on the road or on the bandstand or whatever, but other than that it's incredible to hear all these oral histories and people's experiences and stuff like that. It's very, very special, very cool work you're doing, man. It's great.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate that, man, especially coming from you, brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And equally important, hopefully we'll get you out to LA, or I'm in New York a lot, so I'll have to come hear you in New York, or I know you're worldwide at this point, so I'll
Man,
catch
it's
you
crazy.
in some
I
city
appreciate that.
somewhere, and we'll have to tangle some notes, the two of us, at some point as
Hey,
well.
man, that'd be great, man. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Yes,
But
sir.
yeah, man, it's what I was gonna say. I had something else I was gonna say too. I'm coming to Black Cat August
Oh,
10th. Yeah,
okay, cool. Up in the
yeah.
Bay, beautiful.
Day, yeah. I know that's further out, but
No, I get up
I'm
there.
usually out in that part, like at some point, so I'll let you know as well.
Yeah, let's get you. It's starting to. There's a lot going on in the Bay, and Ambrose is kind of like at the head of what's going on at the Hancock Institute in
Right,
LA, and
right.
I'm at Cal Arts, so we'll have to come up with a scheme to get you out there so people can hear what's going on.
Hey man, let's put it out there, man. I'm
Okay,
definitely down. Definitely down.
sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. All right. Thank you, man. We'll be in touch.
All right, brother. Appreciate you,
Okay.
man. We'll be
Peace.
in
Talk
touch.
to you soon. Peace.